Hi, I'm Malika Bilal in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, Chile's ancestral land fight. Can the conflict between the government and the indigenous Mapuche tribe be settled before the violence escalates? Omar Badar is here filling in for me as digital producer. Omar, what are you seeing so far?
We're seeing a lot of actually feedback online. Even though there is some criticism and some critical voices, the voices are largely sympathetic essentially to the Mapuche fight for the land rights. We have this video comment here from Julio Osas. Take a listen.
Es un problema con un grupo de gente, sino que es un problema con nuestro propio pasado. Nosotros somos un país absolutamente mestizo. Los mapuches estaban antes que nosotros acá. Cuando llegaron, quienes llegaron fueron despojados de sus tierras, pero especialmente fueron despojados de su legado.
So you can see that was in Spanish with obviously English subtitles. He was mentioning at the end that people were not only displaced of their land but also of their legacy, which gives you a sense of how difficult an issue this is to kind of address in a meaningful way that makes people happy. Of course, for those of you at home, you can be part of this conversation by tweeting in using the hashtag AJStream.
And I love that we're getting bilingual comments.
Yes.
Now, of course, also in the studio, we have Jorge. Jorge Contese is a human rights activist and a professor of law at Rutgers University. Jorge, welcome to the stream.
Thank you.
Now, before we start the discussion, here's a quick look at some of the other stories you're following on Twitter. A battle over land is brewing in Chile. The country's indigenous, the Mapuche, are fighting to reclaim ancestral territory, an issue that Al Jazeera's Activate has reported on.
Digamos, subsistir solamente de la tierra como lo han hecho nuestros antepasados. Entonces ese es el fin nuestro.
And to do that, some Mapuche are resorting to violence, despite the announcement by Chile's president to return portions of land. The violence has led the government to categorize several members of the Mapuche as terrorists, as clashes with police continue. But there's division among the Mapuche. There are some who want the government to keep the land in exchange for more representation in Congress. Well, to help us discuss this fight, we have Rafael Reloff, is head of the Mapuche Foundation, who joins us from the Netherlands. In Santiago, Enrique Calfucura, an economist, and Sam Edwards, a reporter with the Santiago Times. Thank you all for being on the show today. Now, we reached out to government representatives for comment, but they declined. So I want to start on my computer. Last week, President Michelle Bachelet marked the Mapuche New Year with this statement. Have a look at my laptop. Almost 25 years and 5 presidencies have passed since we recovered our democracy, and despite our efforts, we're still in debt to Chile's indigenous people. Jorge, she says, now is the time to have the courage to take new steps forward. Do you think that the government is taking the correct steps forward?
Well, first of all, I think these type of statements have been made before, many times, several times before in the recent history of Chile, at least for the past 25, 30 years. What I would say is different today, though, is that there are some actual steps that this administration is making. Just to name a few and to open up for the conversation, I would say that Chile ratified ILO Convention 169, which is the most one of the most important international instruments, at least the most important in terms of binding, fully binding international instrument. Now, this instrument provides for the right to prior consultation of indigenous peoples. And even though this international treaty was ratified in the first Bachelet administration, there have been huge problems in implementing this international treaty. Today, the administration has decided to stop some of the bills that were supposed to be sent to Congress that deal with indigenous affairs generally, not only Mapuche, but generally, so that these consultation processes can actually be carried out. So there's a question of whether or not this means that some actual steps, that the administration is taking some actual steps, and I think they are, in better than they were doing before. Now,
right.
This has to be translated into actual policy, right?
Well, before we get to policy, I want to stop you there on
Sure.
thinking that they have taken some positive steps. Rafael, I'd love your thoughts on that and whether or not you agree with what Jorge said on this as being a positive step from the government.
Yes, indeed, it is. It is. It will be nice to make this more feasible for the Mapuche people, because till now we didn't saw like this a big step like this. So we are very curious what is going to happen in the future. Like Mapuche said, we have to wait for the results. So yes, we are curious. We're very curious, and also I'm also very curious of the Mapuche leaders, what they are responding to this proposal of Bachelet.
Well, why are you so curious? What do you think is different now than in the past previous administrations?
Well, a lot of things are changed in Chile. The Mapuche people, we are also working very hard on the communication of our problems in Chile. So there's a lot of bit, there's more. There's a lot more known about the Mapuche people. It's not like 10 years ago when they were afraid of Mapuche, who had a web page on the internet. And today they accepted, the Chilean population, the officials accepted that we also need to participate in this communication, also free communication. And so it is a new discussion. That's why.
So we have a few people here online who are actually disagreeing about advocating for Mapuche rights to begin with. We have Kariwarmi here, who just tweeted in talking about proposals for dealing with this, says the government needs to apologize to the Mapuche for all the killings and free their political prisoners and return them to full autonomy. On the other hand, we have Beatriz here, who says, in Chile, the Mapuche almost don't exist for me. They are all Chileans and they should respect the laws of our republic, sovereign, free, and democratic. So Enrique, I just wanted to throw this in your direction. What do you think of the idea that advocating for any kind of autonomy for the Mapuche is somehow taking away from Chilean unity?
Well, I have to say that in the current proposals of the Bachelet government, there is not any kind of autonomy discussion yet. It's supposed that in the program, in the presidential program, there is a mention to provide some kind of autonomy to some kind of communities, but so far nothing. And in that sense, also I'm not very clear about what means autonomy for the Mapuches. I mean, you have some people that is thinking about autonomy for small communities, or autonomy to the whole region of the Araucanía, something similar, for example, to what is the Basque country or Catalonia, for example.
Enrique, what does it mean to you? What does autonomy mean in your perspective?
Okay, in my perspective, I think that is to have the resources, not only land, but also more education, more financial, more capabilities to provide a better development of culture and economic issues for the Mapuche.
Well, Sam, you've been covering this issue for about a year and a half. What are those that you speak to in these tribal areas? What are they saying? And what's their relationship with the landowners that have the legal rights to the land, they say?
Well, obviously it varies greatly, but a lot of people are living in very close proximity to non-indigenous landowners. So I suppose that also applies to the sense of autonomy, because that would obviously be a very complicated thing when we've got so many distinct groups living next to each other. It's not a clear separate area. One thing, as people have mentioned, that I think is very important is the issue of greater cultural recognition. That seems to be a recurring issue for a lot of activist groups and campaigners, and for political groups in the Mapuche community.
But what is that relationship like? Is it tense? We're seeing pictures of fires being started. We hear reports of arson. Is it a friendly relationship? Is it always tense? Can you give us some details on that?
It's certainly tense in a lot of places, yeah. I visited a community that's recently just resolved a land dispute that went on for the best part of 15 years in Jazeera, and there, for example, there was a very heavy police presence, there were police barracks, there were cameras, because there would be frequent clashes between police, between activists, sometimes between landowners who take it into their own hands to defend themselves or to provoke attacks.
So part of the problem, obviously, is that these lands already have people who are currently living on them. And we put out the question to our community about what should be done with the people who are currently living there. And we have just 1 second, we'll get to you in a moment. And we have Simone here online who says the people who currently live on the land should be moved and should be financially compensated. If land is earmarked for economic activity, indigenous people must decide its fate. Jorge, do you expect that there's going to be some kind of resistance to any kind of effort to move people off of land in order to return it to indigenous populations?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this is, when it comes to land, obviously there's a lot of resistance from any side. And you said something very interesting that I think it's important for people to know, that some of the current owners of these lands, they purchased these lands in good faith. And so the problem has to do with the way the Chilean state back in the 19th century treated this issue, the way it addressed this issue by saying, you know what, we the Chilean government want these lands to be settled by European settlers, and the Chilean government established some sort of immigration offices, agencies in Europe in order to attract Europeans to go down to the south of Chile. And so today, some of the discussions are the current owners of these lands say, well, we in good faith purchased these pieces of land, and some of these Mapuche leaders are claiming these lands to be theirs, and they have legitimate rights to their ancestral lands, which is the technical word in terms of international law. And so who's responsible for this? And in my view, and I shared this opinion with this gentleman, of course the Chilean government. This is the responsible for both for the Mapuches, but also for the settlers, and then whoever purchased that land in good faith and legally, because there were a number of illegal and fraudulent sales of lands back in the beginning of the 20th century.
Well, Jorge, I know Rafael wanted to get in on this conversation. Rafael, go ahead, and if you could also describe to us what your connection to your ancestral land is.
Yes, concerning the land, I think it is not a problem of the past. It's still today we have new big landowners in Chile, and also that generates the problems. The Chilean government in the past, they announced the Mapuche with the conflict, so that was a Mapuche conflict, but we have to change that into a conflict with the Mapuche government. The Mapuche people has a conflict with the Chilean government, and never it was never a conflict for Mapuche only. So it must be clear for all the people who are listening that. And concerning the landowners, today still they are buying a lot of Mapuche land, and with the Mapuche people, we don't know how to protect our people from that. We don't have the legal help or the money to protect ourselves.
So then this is about representation. No, I want to go to my computer here because as one of the things that President Michelle Bachelet announced last week was 3 points. And these were 3 points that were part of a 50 policy target plan. Establish indigenous representation, create a Department of Indigenous Affairs, better access to education, health, land, jobs. Enrique, are these enough for you? Does this especially the representation, does that solve things for you?
Okay, these three specific proposals were in the probably 10 years ago in the commission that was implemented by President Lagos about the new treatment for indigenous people. Okay, and you waited 10 years to have this implementation. is enough depends on how it's implemented. I don't really know what are the specific points. For example, in the case of the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs, what will mean, what are the powers of the ministry. And for example, in the second point, in the terms of this Council for Indigenous People, I don't know what will be the representation there, how representative will be, and how that will deal with the conflict in the south of Chile, you know, because if it's the same that we have today, that we have some representative, indigenous representative in the government, and they are from, most of them from political parties. Then I don't know, people in the conflict in the south are not in the traditional political parties. So I don't know what difference would mean.
So we have a couple of comments here online also. Zashnain says decolonization must take place, and that includes land rights and indigenous community participation in decision making. On the other hand, we have Pato here who says the Mapuche already have enough rights over us. We just keep giving them more. Sam, I'm curious if you have a sense of where this kind of frustration comes from. What is exactly happening on the ground that creates that sentiment that maybe the Mapuche have too much already?
Certainly, yeah, there's a lot. Well, I think it's become very polarized, especially recently, because people are living quite separate lives. They're not having a lot of interaction in some of these communities, and I think people outside of the Araucanía especially have very little contact with Mapuche groups, so it's quite far removed. And there's been a lot of high-profile cases. For instance, there was one high-profile case in early 2013 where an elderly couple died in an arson attack, and one Mapuche man was eventually convicted of that. And I think that people see these stand out and exceptional cases, but very extreme cases, and there's a lot of resentment from that. And so there is certainly a very big division when you speak to people on the street between people who sympathise with them and people who really feel that Mapuche that certain Mapuche activists have gone too far in certain instances.
Well, Jorge, Sam mentioned the arson attack. He mentioned those techniques. What is the thinking, at least your thinking, on whether or not those techniques will lead to better representation, or the government coming out and saying, actually, this is terrorism? Does that further marginalize this group?
Well, that discussion is, I wouldn't say old, but at the outset, you said before violence escalates, and the fact of the matter is that violence has already escalated.
So it can't get worse, is what you're saying?
Well, it does can. I mean, yes, it could get worse, and of course, no one hopes that that's going to happen. But I guess, some of these arson, incidents, they were treated by some of the former administration as criminal acts, specifically as terrorist acts. Now that has meant that Chile is now facing a case, a decision by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that should be handed down today, tomorrow, next week, I don't know, pretty soon, because of the use of this specific statute, the anti-terrorist law, against Mapuche leaders. So you see these problems. Many countries have faced this type of problems when it comes to land claims. You think of New Zealand back in the 1970s. The administration of former President Ricardo Lagos, the way they treated this, they addressed this by using this anti-terrorist statute instead of, some of the political vehicles or, avenues that may be used, which is what I think the current administration of Michelle Bachelet has understood. But after a lot of violence, and from both Mapuches and the state, and when the state uses violence, that's basically meaning, using the strictest laws that are available, which is the anti-terrorist statute.
Rafael, I'm actually going to throw this to you, but I do have a comment that's essentially discussing this precisely. Hassan here says, is the Chilean military alone capable of suppressing this rebellion? What are the odds of major unrest? And kind of just wanted to throw it your way and see, do you worry that this could actually escalate and get out of hand completely?
Well, I don't think so. The media, the press in Chile is very bad informed about Mapuche people, what they're asking for. So if you want to see something on the television in Chile, you see only the violent part of the Mapuche. But it's not only we are not only trying to to call to a conflict in Chile, but we're also working on our language, on our culture, on our land. But it's not violence. So it's very pity, very sorry about this situation on the press and also on the media. So it's also I don't like to connect Mapuche people in this case with violence or with aggression or in a call to war, because it's not only that what's happening with our people.
Of course, it's not only that. I do want to take a look at my computer here. This is just a little clip from a series called Activate on Al Jazeera. This is from a while back, but this is something that we've seen happen in the present day also. So have a look at this. This is Mapuche activists, and they're gathering. They know that the cops are coming, they say. This is them making the call, and they're gathering actually in front of a church that they say also took some of their ancestral land. You see the police come in to address them.
You see,
So
one of the prisoners.
Rafael, go ahead. Go ahead, Rafael.
One of the prisoners is a Machi. This one of the shaman and the spiritual leader of our community in Chile. And just to dress like Mapuche, you can get imprisoned in Chile. That's the situation today. So what Bachelet is calling now, there will be some changes. So we will wait about this. We are waiting to see if we can wear our traditional clothes in the future, so that our leader can walk free to the street with this traditional clothing, like you saw on the video. And also, what about the political prisoners in Chile? What are going to change that in their situation?
So Sam, you have Rafael here talking about not being able to wear some of the ancestral clothing, the traditional clothing of the Mapuche, and then you have President Bachelet talking about representation in Congress. Are these two things at odds? Is there a middle ground here that someone needs to be looking at?
Yes, it should be. Of course, there are some change going on this time, but there is a lot more to see on the Congress, because a couple of months ago there was a Mapuche sister. Okay. A Mapuche sister went to the Congress and to get a prize, and she walked into the Moneda Palace with her traditional clothing. So the whole security was upset. So that's
Enrique, you have about 30 seconds. Go ahead, Enrique.
Yeah, I don't agree so much with that. I mean, more than the main point here is discrimination, you know, and you need to give more knowledge to the rest of the Chilean population about what is to be a Mapuche, and you need to implement some policies to recognize and to include the traditional Mapuche culture in the Chilean education. Chilean doesn't know what is to be a Mapuche, you know, and then because you see someone who is different, and they discriminate. So everyone needs to recognize Mapuche as a different culture and respect that. And for that, is education.
Enrique, we're going to have to end it right there on those words that Chile doesn't know what it's like to be a Mapuche, and I know Jorge and Sam will have something to say about that as well. We'll have to do it in the post show, unfortunately, because that's all the time we have for now on this show. So on the next show, arguably the world's most dangerous book. We'll examine the debate over publishing Adolf Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf. Does Germany have a social responsibility to ban it? But stay with us. The post show is next. It's stream.aljazeera.com. We'll see you online. Welcome to the Post Show. We're discussing the Mapuche tribe's fight over ancestral land in Chile. Now, right before we headed into the Post Show, we were going to hear from Sam. Sam is in Santiago, Chile, and is covering this issue. Sam, my question to you is, we heard Rafael say that there's some people in Chile who are not even allowed to wear their traditional clothing. And then you have the president talking about political representation in Congress, and it seems like those two things are very far apart. Is there a middle ground towards indigenous rights?
Well, I'm not sure about Rafael's example, but I would say that some of the common things that quite a few people are calling for, even people on both sides of the political spectrum, is for recognition in Chile's constitution of the Mapuche people. Currently they're not recognized, nor is their native language, and some other things would also be, as well as recognition in the constitution to have a great form of political autonomy over local decisions. That seems to be a common cause of conflict, is environmental issues in the local area that tend to be focused around the Araucania region, and there not being sufficient consultation on that with the local communities in those areas.
Omar, I know our community had their own ideas. I love when they come forward with ideas.
They do, and there's a lot of commentary on economic development, whether that's essentially a hindrance or an advocate for Mapuche right advancements. We have IX here who tweets in saying, Chile needs to reevaluate priorities between national economic development and people's rights. So she sees that conflict between them. On the other hand, Aime here says that economic development often leads to inclusive growth, which positively impacts the masses, availing them benefits and equal to rights. Jorge, I'm just curious, do you see that? I mean, how much of this is just a matter of the Mapuche people being underprivileged, and that if you can make them on equal footing with the rest of the country, that would, to large measure, solve the problem instead of looking at it specifically from a land rights perspective?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, that the rhetoric of equal footing can be tricky here, as well as the rhetoric of inclusiveness. There are questions to be raised. What does it mean exactly to include, others, and to put them in an equal foot? So, economic development is critical, and interestingly enough, economic, investment in the region of the Araucania, where most of the rural Mapuche live in Chile, has decreased dramatically over the past years. Notwithstanding, there are projects being developed there that are creating wealth, but hardly creating jobs. So this is a pattern that we see in other parts of Chile as well, that do not necessarily deal with issues of ethnicity. So economic development is critical, of course, but I think it has to be carried out in the context of political rights, self-determination, autonomy, as I think Enrique was saying at the outset.
Right. And Rafael, go ahead.
Yes, there is a lot of there are a lot of plans which are trying to implement in the region, but the big question is, are the Mapuche asked to when they are going to implement the plans? Do they have a participation? I don't think so.
Well, isn't that part wasn't that part of her announcement? Wasn't that part of the plan to ensure that there was consultation with indigenous groups?
Yes, that's a big problem, I think, but because, like I said, there's no participation of the Mapuche people in all the plans are made by the different Chilean governments.
I would say that it will be interesting to see if the most belligerent communities in the south are willing to participate in this consultation from the government. I mean, I'm not sure.
What do you think the odds are?
I don't know. I mean, I think that the three main points in the proposal are not enough for them. So even that, it's difficult to see that they will participate in the consultation.
Well, that is one that we'll have to see. Unfortunately, we're all out of time for this conversation. It looks like everyone wants to jump in right at the end. But I want to thank our guests for being part of this: Sam Edwards, Rafael Reyes, Enrique Calpucura, and Jorge Contese. Now on the next show, arguably the world's most dangerous book, We'll examine the debate over publishing Adolf Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf. Does Germany have a social responsibility to ban it? Until then, we'll see you online.